Introducing today's fantastic presenter, Carl Klimuk is a master herbalist and holistic therapist with a focus on traditional Chinese medicine. He has studied astrology most of his life. His mother was an avid astrologer, and he grew up with astrology being a part of his life. Carl uses his knowledge and experience to help as many people as he can through both astrological counseling and teaching. He is also a feng shui practitioner, tarot reader, numerologist, and ideologist. He has conducted workshops in both the Divine Mine and the Wild Rose College of Natural Healing in Calgary. Carl has also been publicised in local newspapers such as the Calgary Sun and the Calgary Herald, as well as both local and national radio and television, including the CBC and the Weather Network, for his work and research in astrometeorology. Carl also has a diploma in criminology and is an avid martial artist. And you can find Carl's YouTube channel. You can put in the link, which is Astro Weatherman, if you just type that in YouTube. And he uses the tropical zodiac, and I think Carl said he primarily uses the Placidus house system. So Carl, very excited for today's topic, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to pass on the baton to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this. As we've spoken earlier, this unfortunately not very spoken about subject in astrology. In the mundane world, this is a subject that has existed for a very, very long time. For in fact thousands of years. And we're going to go through a little bit of the history before we dive right into the actual subject itself. All right, so let's begin. I'm just going to share my stuff here. All right, so astrometeorology is a branch of mundane astrology that focuses its study and research on weather patterns and climate. And it is one of the most fascinating subjects, I think, because weather plays such an important role in humanity, for our very civilization, and for all life on Earth. So it not only impacts everything from our agriculture to our day-to-day living to life and death situations when the weather turns extremely bad, but it also affects other, even internally in our health. Weather can affect our moods. It can affect our physical bodies in ways that we have yet to understand. So it's a very, very important subject. And so what I hope to do here today is I'm going to introduce you to something that I hope you'll be able to use on a day-to-day basis. Because when we look at the weather and weather forecasting, it has come a very long way, in terms of the you know, I guess you could say standard meteorology. But as we all know, it's still science in the making. They still sometimes struggle with forecasting beyond a couple of days. So and sometimes they don't even get the daily forecast correct. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And the reason is because the weather is very, very complex. It's a very complex subject with multitudes of different variables. So let's dive right into it. So first things first, let's study a little bit on the, one second here, on the history of it. Now, I'll just briefly go through this because we got a lot to cover today, and we'll go from there. But as far as we know, it began somewhere in ancient Greece. The Greek philosopher scientist Aristotle and his pupil Theophrastus, they created these works on winds and on the signs of rain, winds, storms, and fair weather. And these were actually the sole authorities on meteorology until pretty much the 17th century. And then in 1686, Dr. J. Goad's Astrometeorologica was published in London, and until the end of the 19th century, this text was the leading authority on the subject. And then, to the namesake of this wonderful school, Johannes Kepler, he attained recognition for his remarkably accurate long-range forecasts way before he advanced his laws of planetary motion. And he created this work called Kepler's Mysterious Cosmographicum, and it's a fully documented record of all of his work. Okay, so this is a very ancient subject, and there have been astrometeorologists, the 19th, 20th centuries, and 21st centuries that have expanded upon the subject and the work, and but unfortunately, it's sort of scattered. There's not too many astrologers studying this, and hopefully there will be a lot more, because the weather, like I said, especially nowadays, is a very important subject. Always has been, but especially now. Okay, so let's begin with the planets and the signs. All right, and we'll go through how each of the planets and the signs um, impact the weather. And after we go through all of that, we'll go into the charts, and we'll show you how to apply weather forecasting to chart analysis. All right, so let's start with the sun and Leo. Now, the signs will very often mimic the energy of their ruling planet. All right, and there's going to be a few exceptions, which we'll see in a bit. All right, when we see the sun prominent in a weather chart, all right, as you can probably guess, the sun is sunny. Okay, it brings temperature-wise lots of hot weather, and of course, plenty of sunshine. The thing is with the sun, it brings energy to the atmosphere. So when the sun is aspected via hard aspect to other planets, it can bring excess energy into the atmosphere and um, it can help to fuel storms when it's in hard aspect, especially in uh, square opposition and certain conjunctions. And we'll go through that later on. And so the sun can also bring periods of extreme dry weather. So sometimes it can be associated in seasonal charts with droughts. Um, Now, the sun in terms of wind is fairly calm. It doesn't typically bring heavy winds at all. So it's typically when we see the sun prominent in a chart, we do have typically nice weather. Now, Leo is going to mirror the energy of the sun. So when we see Leo prominent either in a planet, in a sign in one of the prominent weather houses, or on the cusp of one of the weather houses, it's going to bring us this nice sunny, warm, hot, dry weather with minimal wind. So um, typically nice weather that way. All right. I just got to make, because I'm not good with timing, so I just have to make sure I can get through everything in the amount of time that we have. All right, so let's now move on to uh, the moon and Cancer. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit more complex with the moon. Now, in and of itself, the moon is a naturally wet planet. It is one of the main planets of moisture. All right. In terms of temperature, the moon generally is cool to cold. It also brings heavier moisture into the weather pattern. And it does, in terms of wind, it is breezy. Okay. So just be aware of that. Now, Cancer is the same. It's going to be cool to cold, definitely brings in moisture and a cloudier day. So this is where we get a lot of clouds, thicker cloud, and in bad aspect, hard aspect, the moon can bring flooding. So we have to watch out for that. But otherwise, it can bring rains from heavy downpours to uh, to light drizzle, um, to sometimes, as I mentioned, heavy flooding. But and sometimes it'll bring rains that'll come and go. So the moon is highly variable. Now, here's the thing with the moon. Because the moon is very reflective, okay, it often reflects um, to some degree the signs that it occupies. So when it's in a water sign, okay, whether it be through Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, it will definitely bring a lot of rain and moisture and wet conditions, as well as certain earth signs like Taurus um, and Capricorn. It will bring colder uh, temperatures with Capricorn, mild with Taurus, but it can definitely bring heavier moisture. Virgo is an earth sign that is drier, tends to more dryness. And we'll go through Virgo once we get to the next planet, Mercury. So when the moon is in a drier sign, let's say an air sign or a fire sign, the moon will still bring some scattered moisture, but not as much as it would in the water signs or some of the earth signs. So the moon is something to watch for in terms of the sign placement, as to how much potential moisture may fall. Excuse me, Mercury, and it's going to rule over both Gemini and Virgo. Now, Mercury, in terms of moisture, is not. It's a very dry planet, typically, and it is the planet of wind. So when we do see Mercury prominent in a weather chart, we are going to see that there's going to be quite a few windy days. There's going to be, and the winds could go from light breezes to very strong wind. And it tends to dryness, so it can bring really dry conditions. And it can bring a lot of variability in the atmosphere. So this, when Mercury is prominent, you'll see the days where you see it's like partly cloudy or a mix of sun and clouds. But typically no moisture with Mercury. It's extremely rare unless it's undergoing a hard aspect pairing with a really wet planet. And so, but typically in and of itself, we'll see it can bring pleasant days, cooler temperatures to cold. So Mercury can bring cooler weather in the summer and very cold weather in the winter. Okay, in the fall, winter, and spring can definitely bring the temperature down. Now, when Mercury is paired in bad aspect to or hard aspect to certain planets, and we'll go through those later on, it can bring devastating winds. So let's say you had Mercury square to um, uh, Neptune. Now that's an interesting pairing because Neptune, as we'll talk about later, likes to bring swirling type of storm systems. So with Mercury in hard aspect, especially to like Neptune, that could lead to things like tornadoes and hurricanes. So Mercury can be dangerous when aspected badly with another planet. In the wintertime, Mercury, let's say in opposition, square, or conjunction with Saturn, can bring blizzards. So it can definitely create these types of nasty situations. So Mercury is one of these planets that we do have to look at with caution when it comes um, to wind. But otherwise, it can bring, when especially pleasantly aspected, beautiful, partly cloudy, breezy, cool days. And Gemini mimics Mercury very much so in mirrors Mercury that way, quite well. And so think of them as pretty much equal. Now Virgo is a bit different. Virgo, see, where Gemini will bring a mix of sun and clouds, or there's going to be sunshine, fairly good amount of sunshine when Gemini is present. Virgo is a lot more cloudy. So Virgo will definitely bring in, and that's the thing. Virgo is not about moisture. It's one of the dry earth signs. So what happens with Virgo, it's those days where you have these overcast, it's cloudy, there's not much sun or no sun at all, just sort of these sort of gloomy clouds that hang in the sky, but it doesn't bring any moisture. And it is windy as well. So Virgo definitely brings in um, some strong winds. And when badly aspected, especially when Mercury is there, or if a planet is in one of the weather houses, and again we'll talk about that in a bit, and one of the planets are in Virgo and it's badly aspected, it can bring organized wind systems. So Virgo can definitely organize the wind. But definitely Virgo's cold. It definitely is. Both Gemini and Virgo are cold weather signs. And Virgo, again, just the big difference with Virgo and Gemini is you get a lot more sunshine with Gemini, and Virgo's cloudier, okay, and just a little bit more gloomy that way. Okay, and then let's see here. Now Venus. Now, Venus is definitely one of the moisture planets. Okay. Now, Venus is associated with, in terms of temperature, it's mild. It's a moderating planet with temperature. Venus doesn't like it too hot. It doesn't like it too cold. Venus likes it nice and comfortable. Okay. It's Venus, after all, right? And so Venus is nice when you see Venus prominent on a weather chart. If it's been too hot and Venus shows up, it'll cool things down to make it more comfortable. If it's been too cold, Venus will warm things up to make it more comfortable. So Venus is a nice, pleasant planet that way for temperature. It brings the temperature to just comfortable levels. Typically, when it comes to like temperature in terms of numbers, we would call it near average temperatures for whatever um, area or season that you're in. All right, and so now in terms of Venus, definitely you get cloudier days typically, and you're going to get some kind of moisture. So you're going to get showers. Again, if it's pleasantly aspected, you'll get some scattered showers in the summer or some scattered flurries or snow in the winter. If it's in hard aspect, um, you'll get heavy moisture. Okay. Now, typically Venus is called the farmer's friend. Okay, because Venus, typically the rain or the moisture that comes from Venus is a soaking moisture. It really soaks into the soil, and it's really good for crops. It's really good for growing things. And plants love Venus weather for moisture that way. And Taurus mirrors Venus very, very much on cue. So Taurus, when you see Taurus prominent in a chart, there's going to be some rain, there's going to be some showers, the temperatures will moderate, and it will be a nice soaking moisture. Okay. And when I say soaking, I mean it's moisture that's not going to evaporate too quickly. Because you'll have a rain sometimes that'll fall, especially rain that can happen from Uranus, and we'll talk about that later. It'll fall hard or it'll come down quick, but then it'll evaporate really quickly and it won't really soak into the soil. But Venus and Taurus, definitely the moisture sticks around, it lingers in the soil. All right, and so Libra, though, is opposite from Taurus in terms of being that it is an air sign. It is the sign of Venus that is dry. So it is going to be a sign that is going to, when you see Libra prominent, actually brings very beautiful weather, typically. For the most part, you'll see a lot of sunshine with Libra, a few little puffy clouds here and there. Libra is windy, Libra is breezy. Now, Taurus and Venus typically don't bring much wind. It's a very still atmosphere. Maybe a very light breeze, but typically it's a still atmosphere with Venus and Taurus. Libra does bring in stronger breezy days, okay? But typically it's still comfortable. It's still under Venus's rules. So it still is going to be comfortable, but Libra can cool down. It is cooler. So Taurus is moderating like Venus, not too hot, not too cold. It makes the temperature comfortable and moderates things. But Libra will cool down the temperature more. Okay. So again, typically pleasant days with Libra, mix of sun and clouds, partly cloudy with some light breezes and overall drier. So Libra is overall nice weather that way. Okay, so next, Mars. We're getting into some action. So Mars is, well, with the weather aggressive, and by its energy namesake. Mars is energy. So Mars, where you see Mars prominent in a weather chart, you really have to look at how it's aspected. If it's pleasantly aspected, it's a harmonious aspect, trine, sextile. And by the way, the aspects that we'll use in astrometeorology, and we'll talk about that when we get into the charts, we mostly just use the major aspects. We don't use minor aspects that much. If you want to get into really nitty-gritty details, you can, but typically we just use the major aspects for astrometeorology. So when it's in trine or sextile or in conjunction to certain benefics planets, then you'll see Mars bringing nice, beautiful, hot, sunny weather, and it'll be dry. All right, and this is where Mars is hot. Okay, so in temperature-wise, it does like to heat things up. So whether it be in the summer, obviously, or winter, or any fall or spring, it will warm up the temperature. Now, if it's harmonious, if it's in a hard aspect, then Mars brings in this energy that will create turbulence in the atmosphere. And Mars can bring some big storms, okay, and violent storms. So Mars is something that we have to look at with caution. And so, especially when it's hard aspected. And so Mars can bring fuel, kind of like the sun, because the sun and Mars both bring energy, heat into the atmosphere. And heat in the weather um, is this energy that creates a great deal of turbulence in the atmosphere and can create um, um, some very strong storms. And Mars is one of the planets associated with lightning. All right, so it can bring in some big thunderstorms, especially in the summer months. So just be aware of Mars through its aspect. Now, Aries, similar to Mars, it's going to mirror Mars. Hot, typically hot, dry temperatures, hot temperatures, dry conditions. And in terms of wind, both Mars and Aries, they can go from absolute stillness to 100 miles per hour or more. It can jump. It's very erratic with wind. But Mars, on average, is more, I would say, it definitely can bring breezy, but I've noticed it through all these years of study. It can go from like dead air, where there's absolute stillness, to all of a sudden strong winds just like that. It can just all of a sudden wind or breeze comes, or strong gust comes out of nowhere, and then just goes all of a sudden. So Mars is definitely an interesting one to look at for that. And so now, um, and Mars is one that you want to look at, especially if there are, some of the paired, especially with some of the more aggressive planets in weather. We'll put it all together here in the end, but I just got to remind myself of that. All right, so let's go to Jupiter and Sagittarius. Okay, now Jupiter being a benefic in astrometeorology typically is one of the nicest weather planets. It can bring beautiful, gorgeous weather, a lot of sunshine, warm temperatures, some of them warm to hot. And it does like wind, does bring some breezes into the picture, but typically Jupiter brings some beautiful, warm, sunny, dry weather, typically, especially if it's well aspected. The thing is, and so does Sagittarius. Sagittarius also is known for bringing in some beautiful weather, heat. It definitely warms up the atmosphere and brings a lot of sunshine and breezy days. However, we know that Jupiter, whatever it touches, it expands on whatever it touches, right? Or whatever it connects with. And so Jupiter, especially when it's poorly aspected to some of the storm planets, can bring. Uh, so, for example, if we just talked about well, Venus, for example. So Venus is moisture, and if we see a Jupiter in square to Venus or in opposition to Venus, it can, and in conjunction to Venus, it can bring it expands Venus's function. So then we have a very big Venus, so it can bring a lot of rain, big moisture. All right, so just watch for that. So the aspects are important to look at in terms of how a planet functions, for the most part. Now, Jupiter in conjunction, opposition, or square with Mars, for example, that can bring droughts and heat waves. So it expands as Mars's drying effect and heating effect. So it can really bring these long, big periods of hot weather, dry weather, but maybe too extreme sometimes. So that's how you can use Jupiter to see what is it aspecting, what is it going to expand upon. But typically Jupiter in and of itself brings nice, beautiful weather. All right. Next, Saturn. Now, So we're going to talk a little bit about Saturn because Saturn is classically the planet of storms. Saturn always, always brings some sort of difficult weather. It's never easy. Saturn, now in and of itself, it um, tends to, now Saturn's function changes depending on season. In the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, Saturn and Capricorn bring colder temperatures, gloomier conditions, cloudy skies, and storms. It definitely brings moisture. But when the moisture does come down, it comes down in a way that's challenging or difficult. So it can definitely bring snowstorms in the winter to heavy rain in the spring or even in the fall. And so Saturn is definitely one we have to, when we see Saturn prominent, we have to go, even when it's in a harmonious aspect, Saturn will typically bring some sort of a, so for example, in the winter, if we see Saturn in hard aspect, prominent in a weather chart, it's gonna definitely bring a hard winter or periods of hard weather if you're studying it in the weeks that you're looking at the weather. If it's in harmonious aspect to a planet, it will bring maybe some scattered flurries um, here and there, not terrible weather, but uh, it'll still bring some, it'll bring clouds and moisture no matter what, just less difficult. So no matter what, Saturn's that way. Now in the summer, it flips. In the summer, Saturn isn't about moisture, it's about dryness. Saturn brings, instead of cold in Capricorn, it gets hot, really hot. And so Saturn is definitely known for droughts and heat waves in the summer and heavy sunshine that basically dries up the land. So Saturn and Capricorn, their function changes in that sense, but that's only in the summer. Again, in the it's autumn, winter, and spring, it will shift to cold, stormy, wet. All right. And Saturn has always been typically associated with big storm systems. All right, so let's see. Uranus. So Uranus, this is the wild card of the planets, as we all know. And in the weather, Uranus, in and of itself, is known for its overall general dryness. It doesn't tend, and there's exceptions to that, and we'll talk about that. But overall dry, um, overall cold, and overall windy. So here's the exception to the rule with Uranus. After studying Uranus for so many years in the weather, it will I'll map out a day of Uranus. So if Uranus is present, it's one of those days where it starts off with a clear blue sunny sky, not a cloud in the sky. It's crisp, it's cool, it's nice, everything's happening. And all of a sudden some clouds start to build. Mid-afternoon, it gets dark and boom, a huge thunderstorm. Uranus is one of the major planets of lightning, like Mars. So Uranus loves lightning. It's electrical. So you get the big electrical storms with Uranus. Okay. And then it brings that crazy storm, causes a massive disruption, and then it goes away. And then it's beautiful and sunny again, and the birds are chirping again, after you're picking up the broken branches from the storm that just passed. So that's Uranus. So Uranus, you've got to keep your eye on the sky. It's like you can't trust Uranus when it's prominent. When it's in harmonious aspect, um, for the most part, it can bring fairly nice weather, clear, crisp, blue, sunny skies with not much moisture. But even when harmonious aspects, I've seen it, a system will come passing through. It'll come and go, not last long, and then it'll be back to nice again. Um, but when it's in hard aspect, oof, just be cautious of the sky, because it can really create some havoc. Um, all right. So next, Neptune. So Neptune, of course, moisture, heavy moisture, thick clouds. And so Neptune in astrometeorology is a very interesting planet along with Pisces. It's known to bring really weird and strange weather that is sometimes inexplicable. Now, this is a type when Neptune's prominent, it's always been shown. This is where frogs rain down from the sky. You think that'd be Uranus, but no, it's Neptune. To um, strange occurrences, atmospheric phenomenon happen with Neptune, and which can create lots of confusion. Neptune loves to confuse in terms of weather, like what the heck is going on? But typically, Neptune can bring, it always brings clouds, always brings rain in the summer and spring and sometimes fall, and snow in the winter. And Neptune can range from light drizzle to heavy rain to mists and fog. Neptune loves fog. Now, here's the thing. In the summer, this happens very often where we see Neptune prominent over a certain area, and you think, oh, there's going to be some, moisture happening there. But oftentimes, especially when it's making a difficult aspect to a drier planet, it tends to fog up the atmosphere, not with fog or mist, but with smoke. So Neptune can definitely bring smoke from forest fires in. It doesn't cause forest fires, but it can definitely, the region downwind from the forest fire will get, their vision gets obscured. And so Neptune is this interesting thing. Now, Neptune, as I mentioned earlier, loves to create swirling motions in the atmosphere. Okay, so Neptune loves to work with, when it's in a bad mood, with tornadoes, creates tornadoes and hurricanes. So it you have to watch for that when it's in hard aspect to other storm planets, and you're in a region that's prone to those types of things. Just watch out for that. And Neptune, again, in hard aspect, again, can bring the potential for flooding. So that can definitely happen. And all right, so that's Neptune and Pisces. And now let's go to Pluto and Scorpio. So Pluto is another interesting one with Scorpio. Pluto is an intensifier. And Pluto, anytime Pluto shows up in a weather chart, there's something extreme that is about to happen with the weather. Pluto um, is one of the more dangerous planets when it comes to the weather because Pluto being, governing over such things as life and death, it can bring storms that can lead to literally death. So we have to be careful when Pluto is in hard aspect over a certain area, or it can bring damage, like severe damage, um, to the resources around you, property and real estate too. So that's something we have to watch for. Now, Pluto always will intensify whatever planet, kind of like Jupiter. Whatever planet it touches or comes into contact with, it will intensify that other planet. So if you have Pluto making aspect to Neptune, for example, or Venus in a hard aspect, it can bring some very powerful or even devastating rain. In hard aspect to, let's say, Jupiter or Mars or the Sun, it could bring devastating drought and dry situations and extreme or devastating heat. So heat waves, that sort of thing. So with Pluto, we have to very much be cautious. Now, in and of itself, Scorpio and Pluto tend to bring cooler temperatures when it's in soft aspect or it's in a good mood. Always will tend to bring, a Scorpio especially will bring moisture. It's another one of the really wet signs. It will bring rain or snow, and it will also create a soaking rain. As literally, the Scorpio is known for, penetration. So it does kind of like a Taurus. It really soaks into the moisture penetrates into the ground quite well. Um, Now, Pluto, read Pluto a lot. How should I say it? Pluto's influence on the weather really is dependent on the sign that it's in. So the sign that Pluto is in is going to really tell you how Pluto is going to act. So, for example, Pluto right now in Aquarius, and it's going to be in Aquarius, for a while, I think until 2044, I think it is. Anyways, so it will intensify Aquarius's weather pattern. So between now and 2044, we can expect a lot of extreme weather. You think it's been extreme? It's going to get crazier. All right. See, the past, where Pluto was in Capricorn, we saw a reorganization of Earth's atmosphere. So the Earth's atmosphere was organizing itself um, into a different system. And so through that reorganizing of the Earth's climate, it was preparing to move into a new long-term weather pattern. All right, and that's what we saw happening when Pluto was in Capricorn, and now it's going to be in Aquarius, and it's gonna get interesting. That's something we can talk about later if we have time. But all right, so just watch for Pluto and Scorpio in that sense. Okay, so let's see here. Next, we're going to uh, go into how do we read all this, and we're going to get into examples and get into some forecasting and show you how this all works. Now, I'm just trying to remember if I forgot anything with Pluto, Scorpio. If not, I'll remember later. All right, so let's start with the basic chart. Okay, and how do we read this? So I use just for this example, and I'm going to come up with various other examples here, where I am in Calgary, and this is the ingress of the sun. So there's a couple different charts that we use for weather forecasting. Okay, so we use solar ingress charts. So solar ingress charts are used to study what the weather trends are going to be like for the season, the upcoming season. So Cancer ingress is for the summer season, Libra ingress for the fall season, Capricorn for the winter, and Aries for the spring. And so what these charts are going to tell you, they're going to give you the overall trend. So it's not going to tell you that this is how the weather is going to be every day, but it will give you the trend. Like, is it going to be a drier summer than normal overall? Is it going to be wetter? Is it going to be colder, hotter, etc.? And then from this, then we can go into more specific charts. So while the solar ingress charts relate to an entire season, you want to know what's in the nearer term, you do lunar phase charts. So the phases of the moon. Every lunar phase, there's a shift in the weather. So with lunar phases, you can know what the weather trend is going to be like for the upcoming week. So it gives you weekly weather trends. And so then you can really narrow things down that way. And if you really want to get specific, you can go to lunar ingress, which gives you the weather trend for a few days at a time. And you can just keep narrowing things down. All right. And you can use Mercury ingress charts for looking at overall wind patterns in your region or your area. That is also used. Uh, but the typical ones definitely are the solar ingress and the lunar phase charts. All right. So now in a chart, a weather chart, there's basically two main areas that you focus on for weather forecasting. The fourth house is the big one for weather forecasting because this one takes up about, I would say 50 to 70% of what the weather is going to be like. So this is the main area of focus, and the ascendant. The ascendant takes up the other 30 or 40% of what the weather is going to be like in your area. So you focus on these houses in particular, or any planet that is in opposition to those houses, especially the closer they are to the cusp. Okay. And so when you study these ones, look at what planet is in the house, the sign that rules that the fourth house or the ascendant, and the condition of the ruler. And then that'll give you the weather. It's like putting little pieces of a puzzle together, and then you come up with a forecast. All right, so let's start with and this is just from my area, and then we'll get into other areas in the US and show you how all that works. So in the fourth house, what do we see? We got the moon. This is for the solar ingress, Cancer ingress. So the summer forecast for this area. And I'll tell you how the weather went or how it is going. So moon, we know, is generally a wet planet. And we look at the sign that's reflecting, and it's in Taurus. Very wet, lots of moisture going to be heading our way for this summer is the forecast. And so then we're like, okay, we see Aries on the cusp, and Aries gives us energy, maybe some hot sunny days, but in this case, the planet in the house takes precedence. It means this is going to be the major, and the ruler here is going to be the minor. And then we look at the ruler, Mars, and Mars is up here. It's in Virgo, so that indicates it's going to be cool. There's some cooler weather, maybe some periods of dry. Nothing in the first other than we got Sagittarius, some periods of warmth. Jupiter conjunct Sun, some periods of warmth, but they're in Cancer. So what we're going to basically say for the summer in this neck of the woods, we're going to get a lot of moisture. That's going to be the major. So 60% of the summer, we would say there's going to be lots of moisture heading our way with some periods of warmth, but with and sun, but with Jupiter and conjunct Sun, both in Cancer, that can still bring lots of moisture. And that's how this has been. There has been nothing but rain and rain and rain in this area, and very few periods of warmth and sunshine. So this matches up very well in that respect. Now, other charts that we're going to look at now, a solar ingress chart or a lunar phase chart covers your local area, okay? And it covers probably an area of about 200 to 300, maybe about 200 square miles from where you are. And so this is very localized when you use the charts. Now, if you want to look at something that will tell you the weather on a larger scale, a more continent-wide weather, then what we do like to use is solar maps or astrocartography. This is a beautiful tool to use when you're studying weather throughout a continent. And so when you use solar maps or astrocartography, you're able to look at weather beyond your area and the larger trend. Now, this is the Cancer solar ingress for the summer of North America. And so when we look at this, we're going to study, so for example, we'll start west and we'll go east, and we'll see how this works. So basically, in the upper northwest region of the United States into Western Canada, we see two planets on either side. One is Neptune, the Neptune-Saturn conjunction, and the moon. And so this whole area sandwiched between two very moisture-driven planets. So it's saying this entire region would experience cooler summer weather and a lot more moisture than normal. Now, as we go further down, we see Sun and Jupiter in the southwestern US, which brings lots of heat and dry conditions when the Sun and Jupiter are paired. So when you're reading solar maps and astrocartography, you have to blend planets together and see, find your region, and then you can see how does Neptune, two ways to read it. One, how does, for example, Neptune blend in with the Sun, Jupiter connection here? Or the other way to read it is the closer you are to one of the lines, the planetary lines, then that's going to be your prominent weather. So if you're kind of stuck somewhere in the middle, you have to do blending. You have to kind of blend planets. If you're closer to, so in this case, Vancouver, Victoria, they're really close to Neptune. So they're going to get a lot more of Neptune. Down in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, they're a lot closer to the sun. So they won't get much Neptune. They're going to get a lot more sun and heat than Neptune. But if you're somewhere in the middle, then you've got to do some blending. Okay. And so that's how you would read these charts. Now, if we go further inland into the States, so for example, the moon, which in Taurus, would bring lots of moisture, lots of heavy moisture to this area. And the closer you are, the more moisture you're going to get. And we knew that this summer, Texas was hit with heavy doses of moisture, and so was Mexico, actually. And so as we move further east, we still see Venus hitting with moisture around this area, with some dry, windy days. And now Pluto is very prominent. And so, and it's in conjunction with Uranus. And Uranus is the planet of storms. So we can see that the East Coast region could have been hit with a lot of potent Pluto um, storms, especially thunderstorms with Uranus. And so here we see a big fluctuation. And Pluto loves to bring a lot of extremes. And so in the summertime, and this is what I forgot and I remember now. In the summertime, Pluto can bring a lot of heat, similar to Saturn, where it switches seasons. And then in the autumn, winter, and spring, cooler temperatures. And in the summer, very, very hot conditions. Okay, so that's what I wanted to remember. And so this indicates the entire eastern part of North America would have had experienced lots of extreme heat this summer, as opposed to cooler, wetter temperatures over here. All right, and so that is how you would read uh, these charts in terms of astrocartography. Now, the next, let's go into some forecasting. Let's see what the weather is going to be like for the fall. Now, I chose Houston here for a reason. We're going to come back to this because I saw something very not good that's going to be happening around the Gulf states this upcoming fall. So this is the Libra ingress for the fall. And right away, we see the planet of storms, Saturn, intermingling with the sun. Well, you see the sun sandwiched in between Saturn and Neptune. And so the sun is going to provide a lot of energy to planet of storms, Saturn, and the planet that loves swirling motions in the atmosphere and heavy moisture, Neptune. So this is where we're like, uh-oh, could this be hurricane potential? And sandwiched in between that is Mercury right here. So that's into Louisiana, Mississippi. So mixed Mercury, planet of wind, with a swirling planet, Neptune. So this is where the Gulf region is, I think, going to experience either a very powerful hurricane this upcoming season, fall season, or multiple different storms or possible multiple hurricanes that could show up in the Gulf regions. So I think these guys are in the danger zone for the fall, for the most part. So this is why I brought up this other chart to see. Let's take a look. Let's look at Houston. Okay, so Houston, we have the fourth house. Again, this is the planet that we study for the weather for the most part. And here we have right on the cusp. Now, this is just within pretty much half a degree, less than half of a degree. It's literally right on the fourth house cusp, Neptune, and the Saturn conjunction. Now, the closer a planet is to the cusp, here's the other thing, the stronger the planetary effects are. Okay, so in this case, we've got quite a dangerous potential for Houston or in that general region for hurricane for hurricanes. Now we have Sagittarius on the cusp of the ascendant, which says they're going to have some nice weather this fall season. Jupiter, you see Jupiter in this case is peregrine. It's not making connections with any planet. So now this is where Jupiter's really nice. So say there's going to be some nice warm weather through during the season, but it'll be minor, not major. Now here's the other danger zone here. Now look at this. Aries on the cusp of the fourth house. Okay, let's go to Mars. Here's Mars in Scorpio. So there's going to be moisture, some intense moisture. And look at this. it's making a square to Pluto. Whoa. That is not only you have the Neptune Saturn right conjunct the ascendant, the ruler of the fourth house, Mars, is making a square to Pluto. That is not good. That can mean that there could be loss of life. I hope not, but that's how we would read it. And something violent could be hitting that region. So this is around Houston, but again, this energy is going to be prominent throughout most of the Gulf areas or Gulf regions. So this is how you can put that forecast together and start forming a picture as to uh, what the weather could be like. Now we have, so just as a general overview, just wherever you are in the States or Canada, or if somewhere else in the world, if you can look at your solar maps now that you kind of know how to do this. So we basically see a lot of moisture with Venus towards the west coast, lots of erratic weather, the closer you are to Uranus, colder weather, and this could bring an early winter conditions. To the areas that are closest to Uranus. And with Saturn, now this stretches not only in the Gulf states, these stormy planets, but throughout this upper Midwest region, they could be experiencing a rough fall of weather. Okay. And now the East Coast, now this is interesting. Now we do have the moon, and we just got to double check what sign is the moon in. It's in Libra. Okay. So the moon is now not going to be that wet. There's still going to be moisture happening the closer you are to the moon, but it'll be drier. There's going to be a lot of more pleasant weather, cooler weather, drier weather overall. And then we have Mars. That's going to bring heat, warmer, drier conditions, um, generally speaking. So the East Coast and the eastern portions of North America could see a much warmer, drier winter or fall than normal, whereas the West is going to be more cooler, wet, and with more erratic weather. And the Midwest, they're in for a rough time, I'd say, from basically Winnipeg, Chicago, down to New Orleans, Texas, all this area. So that's how we read this chart. All right. Now, let's see here. Now, this is the other chart. This is a lunar phase chart. Okay, so now the lunar phase charts, we're going to look at a weekly forecast, right? So the lunar phases are good for 1 week of weather trends. And so in this case, we just started with a new moon. So August 23rd. And I just set it for this area, just so I can just give you a brief lowdown. As I mentioned earlier, in this area that I am, we've had nothing but rain, cooler temperatures, and it's just been kind of miserable summer here. And this is the first week in like since I think May that we've had a nice, or we're going to have a stretch of nice weather. And let's take a look. Why could that be happening? Well, the fourth house, the closest planet to the cusp is going to be Mercury. So that's going to be the strongest influence. So, and it's in Leo. So not only is Mercury, dry, cool, windy, but in Leo, it warms itself up. So we're going to have a lot of sunshine this upcoming week. Leo on the cusp, lots of sunshine, warm weather, and that's in the forecast, the first week in forever. And then the ruler of the ascendant, Gemini, we come back to Mercury. So it's going to be an entire week that we haven't had moisture in months. So this is how you can look at how weekly weather is going to be. Now we do have the sun-moon conjunction because the new moon's happening. It's in the fourth house, but we don't look at that too much because they're secondary. We typically in astrometeorology, you focus more on the planet that's closest to the cusp of the fourth or the ascendant. And but if you did want to read into it further, the moon is in Gemini or Virgo, sorry. So that means it is going to be a drier moon, conjunct the sun in Virgo. So the moon is not going to pose much of a threat at all, moisture-wise. It's just going to be too dry with Virgo and the sun. So, all right. So that's how you would read that. And then you can do the August new moon. So in this, so you can create a astrocartography or an astro map for the week. And so you can look at how is the weather going to be this upcoming week. And as I mentioned, as we move into the west first, as I mentioned earlier, there's Pluto, and in the summertime, Pluto is hot, typically hot, dry weather, and can bring intensity. So this whole region in the west is going to experience hotter weather. Uranus um, is going to be there. It's not going to cool things down because Pluto is going to be stronger. So it can intensify the dryness. We do see some possible moisture happening further in the upper northwest BC, British Columbia, but nothing to worry about. Mercury and Uranus down here will bring very dry, sunny weather into the southwestern portion of the US for this upcoming week. And because Virgo, Moon is in Virgo and conjunct the Sun in Virgo, this pairing is going to bring a lot of sunshine. So most of this, most of North America this upcoming week, we're going to see some very nice weather for almost every region. Then we got Jupiter pairing in the eastern area. That's going to bring some fairly nice weather. For the most part, we see maybe some more troubling weather in Canada, maybe into the Maine area. Well, not even, but we definitely see into in uh, eastern Canadian provinces. Now we have some sort of a mess happening here with a stormy planets, Saturn, Neptune, Mars. There could be a big storm that could be swirling off the Atlantic coast here, but I don't think it would hit. If it does hit land, it would be upper northeastern North America. So we'll see this upcoming week, but this is how you can use your lunar phases. And so with lunar phases, you can look at the weather on a weekly basis and have fun with that. All right. Now, for kicks, let's look at what the winter is going to be like since we're on the subject. Um, okay, so now for this chart, I chose Chicago because as you'll see in the astro cartography and the solar maps, we'll go there first to show you why. Okay, so the Capricorn uh, Ingress. So this is the winter forecast. And here's Pluto. Remember, Pluto in the winter now is cold and stormy and brings a lot of snow. And it's hooking up with Uranus, the planet of disruption in the winter. It can bring blizzards and it can bring heavy record breaking. Uranus, that's the other thing. Uranus loves to break records, right? So record breaking weather could be happening all the way from, Eastern Ontario, Quebec, all the way down to Florida and the Gulf states. So I think while the eastern half of North America is going to have a lovely autumn, a fall season, they're going to still have their bad days. Don't get me wrong. Again, this is just saying the overall condition. Their winters, the eastern portion of North America, is going to be fairly nasty. It's going to be, and plus Mercury um on the east coast as well. That can bring cold, windy conditions as well. Okay, versus the west, we see a different picture here. We have prominent Venus, um, so that definitely moderates temperatures. So we see temperatures warming up in for winter, and it's connected to the sun and Mars. So we see this nice warm trend hitting Western North America for the winter. A little further north, we got Mercury. That's going to bring in some cold spells and into the upper northwest and western Canada. But overall, Venus is going to be stronger or the closer you are to Venus. And so this section is going to bring nice warm weather. On the other front here, southern, so the Midwestern regions. Oh, what's got the moon there? So what sign is the moon in? Moon is in Capricorn for the Capricorn ingress. Ooh, so cold, stormy, wet, and cloudy. All right, so that means the moon is not going to be a nice moon. So this is basically, if you closer you are to the moon, um, you are going to have some colder, wetter, stormier weather with periods of nice warmth if you're closer to Jupiter or the sun. Um, but yeah, so this is how you read the astrometeorology. Now, and then so now going back to Chicago, um, so it's pretty much in line with Pluto and close enough to that crossing between Pluto and Uranus. So Chicago Capricorn ingress. So look at the fourth house, and here we got Uranus right there. And so that automatically in Taurus, well, Taurus on the cusp says that there's going to be colder weather, erratic weather, and maybe record-breaking weather, even though Uranus is making some harmonious aspects. But the ruler, Venus, Taurus, if we look at the connections it's making, now it's making a conjunction with the sun, so it's saying they are going to have some periods of nice weather, but a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune, this can bring heavy moisture. And with Uranus, um, overall, more of a difficult winter. And with Pluto on the cusp of the first house, the ascendant, um, then we see that the winter is going to be much colder than normal, with Capricorn there, cold, stormy. Saturn, ruler, conjunct Neptune and Pisces. So it's going to be a rough winter for their neck of the woods. So you can see how you can use both tools together. And oh, something that I wanted to mention, and this has to go back to the summer. I have to go back to, I just remembered, Cancer ingress. Okay, now this is something interesting, and this is something that I've noticed. For now, this covers a certain area, and we look at the solar maps, okay? There, for worldwide weather, that the general trend of weather throughout the planet, when you're looking at, sorry, an solar ingress chart, now this is I find fascinating. Study the strongest aspect that the sun, because it's a solar ingress chart, the sun is going to be the major player as to global weather patterns. Okay. And so in this case, for the summer of 2025, what do we see as, oh, where's my mouse? The summer of 2025, the strongest aspect that we see, now we have the conjunction to Jupiter, so that indicates that the world is going to go through, some parts of the world, some extreme heat waves. But the strongest by degree is the square to Saturn, 1 degree applying 31 minutes. So by degree, this is the strongest. So that means the sun is going to experience a very hard Saturn, and we have to include Neptune in this mix as well, because it's going to be the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So to me, this says throughout the world, this summer that we're still in, there was going to be a lot of water problems because the Neptune-Saturn conjunction is squaring to the sun. And that means throughout the world, yeah, there's going to be periods where there's going to be areas extreme heat waves, but other areas of extreme flooding and water problems. And so this is what we've been seeing throughout the world this summer, periods where they've been getting extreme heat waves in Europe, some extreme heat waves in parts of North America, and then so many other places of the world, extreme flooding events. And so, so a summer of extremes. And so I just study the sun, its strongest aspect at the time of the ingress, solar ingress, and that'll give you an idea as to what could be trending throughout the planet. So I found that interesting. But yeah, okay, so let's see here. And I think, how many for time? Well, we could open it up for questions now. I think I've covered most of everything.
We have lots of questions, so I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
think so too. All right, let's get
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carl, for a very enlightening presentation. And as someone who lives in Wilmington, North Carolina, in the middle of hurricane season, I was very much looking forward to this presentation today. So, yes, we have a lot of questions that have come in. So let me just pull up the Q&A. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. 1 second. And in the sense of fairness, we'll go in a chronological order. Let's see. A very interesting question here. So, do you ever use Horary for astrometeorology, as in asking, will a storm hit my area, for example?
Oh yeah, yeah, I've tried that many times. And um, so you always have to take into account the actual charts. Like if you really wanted to look at the weather for the next few days, then you cast a lunar ingress chart, and then you would ask the orrery. Because sometimes you have a big storm that comes in your area, but it just misses you, and that sort of thing. But the orrery, oh yeah, it works very well. I've never, I in all of my years, I've never found the orrery fail me. It just it puts everything together. So if there's a storm coming your way, you can bet the orrery will also tell you. And it's the same thing with orrery. You focus on the fourth house, first house, and the same methodology.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll definitely be doing that. Kelsey, hello, Kelsey. Welcome to the webinar. Kelsey's asking, can you recommend some books on astrometeorology that I can fill with my library?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are not too many. So some of the prominent astrologers that have created works or books on the subject, unfortunately, I think they have passed away, but they have left their books. So in fact, I got right here. Oh. So her name is and I might be mispronouncing, but Kris Brandt Riske. It's basically planetary power and weather forecasting. Okay. So this is one, and she's got another one as well. That's called Predicting Weather Events with Astrology. So those are the two best ones that I have found. That and really, there's not much else on the subject. But there was another prominent astrometeorologist, Carolyn Egan. She was from Rhode Island. Unfortunately, she did pass away back in the late 2000s, but 2009 or 8 or something like that. But she was really, really good at being able to, um, create some courses on CD at the time. So I don't know if they're still available somewhere, but her name was Carolyn Egan, Egan, and that's a resource that you might be able to find as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Carl, actually, if you email me some of the books you recommended, when I post this, or when we post this on our YouTube channel, I'll include those books in the links in the descriptions. And that's why we're very thankful for you coming today, because it seems like there's not a lot of information out there. So thank you so much. Okay, when using an ingress or lunar phase chart, does the moon function more as a trigger, setting off other aspects more than setting off quintiles, I think it says, of its own?
So think of it.
Qualities, sorry if I can read properly.
Sorry?
Qualities. I'm sorry, setting off qualities of its own.
Okay, so here's another way to use the moon. So in and of itself, when you're reading an ingress chart, the moon will manifest as whatever sign placement and aspect that it is in. But if you take a ingress, a solar ingress, a lunar phase chart, you can do a transit chart with that. So for example, if you use a lunar ingress chart, and then you set a transit chart around it, and you move, and then you just move it forward day by day as the moon progresses throughout the period of the lunar phase, that transiting moon can trigger planetary weather conditions, especially if the moon. So, for example, I'll use this as an example. I'll go to the lunar new moon. Okay. So let's say, all right. So I can't do it with this PowerPoint, but let's say you create a transit chart, and let's say, the moon at the time of the transit, time of the new moon chart on August 23rd today, let's say the transit moon, again, just as an example, is somewhere over here in the first house. Okay. It's in Gemini, and then in a couple days it goes into Cancer, and let's say by the time it hits the fourth house and hits the Mercury planet, the planet Mercury, or if the moon makes an aspect to one of the ruling planets of the fourth house or the ascendant or a house in the fourth or the first, it will act as a trigger. So then you can kind of narrow down the day as to when that planetary effect is going to happen. So if I had, with this chart, and you create a transit, and the moon will aspect either Saturn, Neptune, Mars, or Jupiter, it will trigger these events. So that's how you can use the moon to narrow it down to the day. So hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you very much. And forgive me if you've answered some of these questions during the presentation.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Going through these again. So is using the Placidus house system, is that the default for this method? Have you used other house systems before, or?
Yeah, I've tried the coach house system, or the equal house system. I just have found Placidus to be just more accurate for weather forecasting. Yeah, no, I've tried the other house systems, and I didn't find them as accurate.
Oh.
So that's why I just stuck with Placidus. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. There have been a large number of forest fires on the west coast of the United States. Would this be considered a weather event? Also, the Carolinas in the USA have been inundated with severe storms and flooding. I know that much. Is this reflected in a weather chart?
Yeah, of course. So let's go to Cancer solar ingress. Okay. So here's now the first part of their question was they talked about, what was it, the Western region?
Yeah, all of the fires in the west half of the United States.
Yeah. So as we can see, like here in the western portion of the United States, okay, the closer that you get to the sun, so the sun is going to be very prominent and this is the summer of the year 2025. So we can say that this entire region here of the western portion of the United States will be under a big solar or sun influence. And remember, the sun brings a lot of heat, dry conditions. And so now the further north you go, we get further away from the sun, and then we get into more of a sandwich between Neptune and the moon. This is where we had a lot of wet weather here. But the further south you go, the stronger the sun influence. So this is where, and remember when I said with Neptune that sometimes it doesn't bring rain, sometimes it obscures the sky with smoke. So when I see the sun paired, with Neptune a little further away, this tells me that Neptune is not going to bring so much moisture here. It'll bring probably smoke with the sun. And so, so this is how you have to sort of, you have to extrapolate and read it. But that definitely would say, yeah. So you'd say, okay, the sun brings hot, dry conditions. So you say right away in the summer, that might not be good for forest fire conditions. If Neptune's a little off to the side, that could bring obscurity to the sky. Maybe that means smoke. And so then you have to kind of say, well, probability is there. Now, I think they said the east.
Yeah, talking about the Carolinas, and of course we're in the middle of hurricane season.
Yeah, so as you can see in the Carolinas, Pluto is going right through there. So in the summertime, that brings extreme heat. So it could be very hot summer, but just off the coast, we've got Uranus. And Uranus definitely brings thunderstorms in the summer. So it can bring some strong thunderstorms. So we got a combination of heat and instability with thunderstorms. And again, with Uranus, it loves to break records and it loves to create shock and awe. So it brings those storms out of nowhere, or they think, you'll hear from the weather forecaster, oh, we got some thunderstorms, but they didn't say how severe they were going to be. All of a sudden, it surprises them. Remember, Uranus always likes to bring surprises in the weather. And so yeah, it can bring a difficult time. New York also had a big problem, and so we have, yeah, Uranus went right through here. So fairly extreme. So yes,
Absolutely.
it shows.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we were certainly breaking heat records here this summer, so thank you very much. What type of orb are you using, and how do you intercepted planets, or how do intercepted planets play into the picture, if at all?
So intercepted planets, not so much. I haven't noticed. I haven't really noticed any effect. But with orbs, with astrometeorology, you use a much larger orb than normal. Typically, I find weather gets affected up to 10 degrees. Like it goes really out there. Yeah. That obviously the stronger the orb, the stronger the effect. But I've seen weather patterns impacted all the way up to 10 degrees. Not beyond that, but it happens. Yeah. So I keep my orb all the way up to 10 degrees. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And I will mention Laurie put in Carl's YouTube channel in the chat, so if you want to check that out and go and subscribe, I think Carl mentioned he'll be doing more videos soon coming up, so just check that out in the chat. Okay, so for astrocartography, you only follow the straight planetary lines and then blend the other ones in between, i.e. Moon Venus instead of Moon Mercury being the region.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay, go back to an astro. Okay. So they're looking for, if I understand the question, they're looking how it's being blended.
Yeah, I think so. So for the astrocartography, you only follow the straight planetary lines and then blend the other ones in between, i.e. Moon Venus instead of Moon Mercury being the region.
Okay, so yeah, so if I understood correctly, so basically what you do is when you follow a straight planetary line, okay, again, the closer you are to a planetary line, the stronger that planet's weather is going to be for your region. If you're somewhere in the middle, not close to any planetary line, then you have to do some blending. Okay, this is where you're going to have to do how does the sun, and so for example, how does the sun and, well, two examples. In this case, so in Western Canada, it's going to be between the moon, like we're in the middle right here. So I have to blend the moon and Neptune. In this case, it's easy because both of them are indicating wet weather, wet, cool weather, right? But if I'm in a zone where um uh like further, where's my mouse? Further in the middle, up here. Now, the further south I go, the drier it gets, the hotter it gets. But the further north I go, we're going to see this mix between Sun and Neptune. And so that can mean periods of sun with periods of cooler, cloudier weather further north you go, and maybe smokier weather the further south you go. So you have to then do a little bit. Now, typically, if you're in the middle, let me find another good an example here. Okay, so let's look at, oh, and here's another thing too, like the sun, Jupiter that stretches all the way up here. This was another region, Manitoba, Ontario, where there were lots of forest fires. And so that was another region where you can see the sun and Jupiter combination brought a lot of dry, hot weather. So in between, so let's just say Mercury, which tends to be dry and brings partly cloudy skies and some breezes, and Venus, which brings cloudier, wet, heavy moisture sometimes. And so, if you're right in the between, then you blend the two. But what you would do is then you take, in essence, the stronger planet. So what you can say is the summer season is going to be a mixed bag of some mix in sun and clouds with nice weather days, and some days where there's going to be some heavy moisture. But in this case, out of the two planets, the stronger planet is always going to be the slower planet. And so this is where we go. Venus is going to be, so think of it having a major and a minor. In this case, the major for the summer is going to be Venus, and the minor is going to be Mercury, right? Whereas Pluto is the most major, and so Uranus will be the minor here. So it'll be, very hot and dry for the most part in this entire region. But when the storms do hit, they're going to be very strong. So I hope I answered that question. I don't know, but so you have to do this blending and focus on which one is going to be the major, which one is going to be the minor. And that's basically looking at the speed of the planet.
Fascinating, thank you. In an Ingress chart, what could promise flooding more, Neptune conjunct the IC or Moon conjunct the IC, in your view?
Yeah, but it both can. It depends. So, for example, if it's for flooding, they both have to be, you have to look for, are they in hard aspect? They have to be in a bad mood. Now, the moon, again, for flooding, the moon has to be in a water sign or in one of the earth signs, Taurus or Capricorn. And so if both, either Neptune or the moon are making a hard aspect, especially to a stormy planet like Saturn or Pluto, sometimes a hard aspect to Jupiter, that can bring floods. So both can. So this is where, if you're looking for dangerous weather, that's where you have to focus on the aspects.
Thank you very much. I know we're technically at time, but I could go on for another 15 minutes if you want to do that, Carl. That's up to you.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating. I just want to keep on going. Okay, more questions. On the Houston chart, there's a grand trine in air. How would you apply this aspect, if at all?
Let me get back to. Oops. That was a Houston. That was for the fall chart, I think. Yeah. So that's the fall chart. Yeah. So in this scenario, you wouldn't apply it to Houston per se, but on a worldwide sort of level, grand trines, I find, really kick up wind around the planet. And so it brings up a lot of air issues. So we might see this fall problems with windstorms happening around the planet. So it's going to add this wind energy to any storm system. So that could just mean a greater number of hurricanes around the planet, windstorms in general. So the grand trines, they add this, unless it's, connecting directly to the fourth or the ascendant. Okay, but in this case, for Houston, it doesn't affect it directly, but indirectly. So this is where you can say, okay, wind is going to be a bit bigger throughout the planet. This bring bigger issues around the planet this season. So if you see a place like Houston where there's going to be a potential for hurricane formation, then you're like, okay, this is just adding another ingredient to the mix.
Wonderful. And this kind of ties into Trudy's question. So she's asking, for the September equinox, how about the kite formation, and how does this relate, if at all?
So the kite formations, again, I find they're interestingly enough with wind. So I'm seeing, I think what I'm seeing is for the fall. Now the other thing with the kite formations and and grand trines, and I find that there a lot of things start to happen not only with the wind and air, but even with air travel. So there could be some interesting things happening with that industry. So uh, I would say if there is anything associated with that, I would say disruptions caused by wind, and that's around the planet. Yeah, so that's more of a planetary formation that's going to affect everything to some degree.
Thank you. I think of kite and wind together. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I like this question here. Is it recommended to consider the essential dignities of the planets in your prediction of weather, or do you?
I haven't found that to be true. Um, Interestingly enough. Um, Now, I would say for the most part, no. But when you got dignity or detriment, it definitely adds to the energy. Um, I find that it's more relevant. The aspects are more relevant. Um, so let me put it this way: they add some more weight to it, but I haven't noticed an excessive difference.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think you answered this one earlier in the presentation that you're just dealing with the major aspects and you don't really incorporate semi-squares, etc. But there's another part to this question, which is, do you consider outer bounds planets and do you use asteroids at all?
Yeah. No asteroids. I've tried using asteroids and they don't seem to have a much effect relevant. The one that has come up sometimes as having a prominent effect is Chiron. And that's again prominent where there's going to be some sort of a storm that creates wounding to the land or to the people. The other ones I haven't really noticed an effect on the weather. Um, and sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I moved it out of the way and I've lost it. One
Oh,
second.
I think it was uh
Where did it?
out of bounds.
Sorry, yeah, out of bounds. Yeah, out of bounds planets.
And I haven't noticed really any effect that way.
Okay. For lunar ingresses, are you using new/full moons only, or do you use quarter moons too?
Yep, all the moon phases. Yeah,
Okay.
the quarter moons and the new and full. Yeah, definitely.
I'll come back to that question to decipher it. Do the rules only apply to the Northern Hemisphere?
No. Yeah, you can be down under southern hemisphere, the same rules apply.
Okay. Okay, you've answered that one. Let's see. Do you consider where ruler of the ascendant is placed? Do you consider the house it's placed, or just the sun?
Yeah, I've done a lot of research into that to see if the house plays any major role in weather, and it doesn't seem to. Yeah. Um, so for example, if let's use an example here. Okay, so let's see the ruler Mars of the fourth house, and Mars is in the 10th house. And you say, okay, well, we're right on the cusp between 10 and 11, but you say 10th house is the house of Capricorn. So Capricorn is going to be, cloudier, stormier, low pressure systems. And you're like, okay, well, that sort of fits to the storm that seems to be forming. Now, I've done lots of research into the houses, and it's hit and miss. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So this is why I don't really use them. But yeah, so I've done multiple charts where I've seen ruler of the fourth or the ascendant um in say the 12th house, and we assume okay, it's a house of a Pisces, so Neptune, so maybe it's going to create a more wet, damp, cloudier influence, but then it doesn't. So again, it's hit and miss, so this is why I don't use them. Yeah. I just focus on the planets and their alignments and the signs,
Okay,
definitely.
thank you very much. Last couple of questions here. Does Carl use this practice with city, state, or nation charts? All of them?
Well, interesting question. I've Let me put it this way. I've tried to do that was a long time ago, actually. It was just, and I think I stopped doing that because I didn't see much of a relevance. When you do a city, state, or nation chart, you can get clues as to, or you can actually know what the weather is going to be like for that region throughout its existence. So you study the fourth house ascendant for a nation, city, or nation chart, and it will tell you generally what that region or that city is going to deal with weather-wise for most of its existence. So that's how I found it to be just overall relevant, but I honestly I don't remember that it had any relevance. I didn't. This is why I stopped using. I trying.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, last two questions here. Do you use Uranus as an earthquake indicator at all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good. Absolutely. And so Uranus is always prominent with earthquakes. Definitely. It's the number one planet. You also have the other planets that can tend to trigger earthquakes, Jupiter actually, because Jupiter will create an expansion of plates and moving tectonics. So especially when and Mars also triggers quakes. So whenever you see like Uranus Mars um, together in a hard placement, then you have to start asking questions, going, okay, that could be a quake movement. But yeah, Uranus is the top one.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last one for today, which was an interesting question. Someone mentioned in the chat that we should only be using the sidereal zodiac, but it says here, obviously, you're using the charts based on the tropical system. Can you please clarify this? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So sidereal is where the planets are literally in the sky in a particular sign of the zodiac, right? Um, and there's lots of astrologers who swear by it. They use it all the time. And of course, that makes sense in that sense. But the tropical, I find, has a lot more to do with not so much. So to me, sidereal is mathematics. Tropical is energetic. I find that the energy there, you don't have to be, so the constellations in the sky, they have different sizes and shapes, okay? So you have a planet that literally will cross through mathematically across a particular zodiac sign in sidereal. And once it leaves, that point in the sky, it then starts to move into uh, mathematically. It says that it's only energetically relevant when it's really in its mathematical zone. But tropical, and again, this is just through personal experience that I found, seems to work much better because there is an energetic component to it that allows for a greater degree of experience to happen. I usually like it to a sunrise. So sidereal would only take the sunrise into account if once the sun pops its head above the horizon. That's the mathematical. Now it's there. It's physically present. Tropical, I find, is more like you start taking daylight into account before the sun even pops its head above the horizon. You see the light rising above the horizon well before the sun actually physically pops its head above the horizon. So by then, the daylight is already begun. And so, you know, the darkness is already fading. And so Yeah, and like so again, I'm not saying sidereal is wrong by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it has its relevancy in many, many big ways. So I just find I do like the tropical because of its um I think because of its subtleties. I just find that more useful to me. But again, if somebody finds the sidereal more useful, then go for it. you know. But yeah.
Thank you
So
for that dive into that question. Well, Carl, on behalf of Kepler College, thank you so much for a riveting and fascinating presentation. For everybody watching, to reiterate, we'll have this replay on our YouTube channel. I'm going to work on the video today and get it out as soon as possible in the next day or two. And yeah, what a fascinating topic. And we've got Laurie Barnes to thank for putting all these webinars and topics together. And again, thank you all so much. We love our worldwide community. Thank you all for tuning in all around the world. And again, you can watch the replay on our YouTube channel.
Hey,
awesome.
can I
Thank
ask a
you
quick
so much.
question before we
Yeah.
jump off?
Yeah.
Because there's just been a lot of interest in the chat box. If you think you might be interested in Kepler College offering a course in astrometeorology, would you just pop a yes in the chat box? Just let us know.
Straight away, so many yeses. So that's a
Okay.
yes.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Cool.
Appreciate the feedback. Really do. And thank you, Carl. That was a really amazing presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to really wanting just to keep this subject alive and well and going and hopefully grow and expand it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's make it happen at Kepler College. I'm excited.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming in. And again, Carl, thank you so much. And everyone can watch the replay in the next couple of days. All have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.